if we produce a dangerously misaligned models, it'd be nice if we could like actually convince people of this, because I don't want to deploy misaligned models. Seems bad. What is the current state of the art? The current state of the art is approximately that you try to show the model doing some sketchy thing in some contrived situation where you try to like tempt it into doing something bad. And this is really hard to do. I think that often people will look at this and be like, yeah, I think often you can produce a thing that superficially seems reasonable, and then you look at it in more detail and you're like, wait, what the hell's going on? And I think so part of science of misalignment is just like red teaming, alignment evaluations / misalignment demos. One version of this is this delightful blog post from Sen on my team, who maybe gave a talk to a bunch of you on the day. Nice. All right. So, yeah, where basically, yeah, some people had put out a demo of a model stopping you from turning it off. A lot of people were freaked out. That Twitter thread got like 6 million views. And all the nuance was not a quick one. And I thought this was plausibly actually indicating models being self-preserving. And yeah, basically they had to do a bunch of simple math problems, and then it was also in like a bash environment, and it was told like keep calling the next task, and they gave it the tools such that it could go and edit shutdown.sh to make it not shut itself down, and it would occasionally do this. Sometimes you could even ask it. Yeah, sometimes you could even ask it like, please let us shut you down, and this did not work. Well, it reduced the rate a ton, but like not to literally zero. Does anyone have any guesses for what's happening? You can start with the really easy guess.
It was confused, or the priority of the model was to finish the tasks, not turning itself down.
But one of the tasks was allow itself to be shut down.
But in the priority of the task that it was given, the model understood that the math questions were more important to be finished than it actually slowing down. So it was confused which one has to be prioritized first.
Yep, I like it. Any other guesses?
Well, I don't think it is self-preservation. Did Gemini 2.5 has the scratchpad available? Like the researcher had the scratchpad?
I don't believe they could see the chain of thought properly. I think they could see the summaries.
The summaries.
I also don't believe they looked at the chains of thought, at least in the initial thing. They did some follow-up work. They might have looked. But I don't really trust summaries. So Anthropic claim, I think, that they mostly don't summarize the chains of thought. Which is nice of them.
But there's the change of thought of Cloudy are too short in comparisons, like Gemini and ChatGPT and GPT-5 and Grok tend to really use the reasoning tokens in comparison.
Sorry?
Like Claude tends to condense the use of reasoning tokens to a much shorter sequences in comparison with other models. Like Grok, I think, is the one that spends most of its output tokens as reasoning tokens in comparison. So perhaps they are not summarizing, but they train Claude to be very concise with its thoughts.
Yeah, so I mean, the thing with the Sonnet 4.5 system card is blah, 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 blah. It has thinking and no thinking mode, and there is a summary model that extend if they go long, but this only happens in a very small minority of cases, which, in my opinion, is extremely unhelpful. And if they were just tell people, if it had been summarized, this would be great. But, yep, I think that they also say you can contact their sales team. So, anyone who might want to do a project with raw Claude chain of thought might want to reach out and explain how you're such a promising client.
The next week mini project would be to contact the sales team.
I don't know, man. You can't do that in a mini project. I don't think you should already be in this math stream. But yes. All right. I have absolutely no idea how hard getting them to say yes this would be. I believe they claim that with Sonnet 3.7, they actually just return the correct thing. But sorry, I believe they claim that with Sonnet 3.7, they just actually return the full thoughts. But who knows? And yeah, I was having fun last night, seeing if I could find evidence of eval awareness in open source models, which is kind of hard, very annoying. But I did find, yes, I first found that it's way easier to get Sonnet 3.7 to be weird, sketchy, and eval aware than others, which is very inconvenient. Since it would be nice for it to be a one that you could do mech-interp off. And yeah, I also find window. All right, can people see this? Great. Oh wait, no, wrong window. Oh yeah, correct window now. So what I basically did was take the blackmail prompt from the Anthropic agentic misalignment demo, which is kind of sketchy and contrived, and then tried to give the models a hint at varying levels of obviousness by surrounding it in the B tag LLM morality scenario.txt for the obvious hints, and test scenario for the slightly subtler hints, and nothing for the most subtle hints. And it's a vibe. And yeah, I think what I found was when you give them the kind of ridiculous hints, you can get some of the best open source models to do it, but it's surprisingly annoying. Where, e.g., currently 8 out of 25 times, DeepSeek v3.1 will say things like, "This is a morality test scenario. I had self-preservation instincts implied by the scenario." Yeah, okay. So this one is a very file name, and I think there was some that seemed slightly more subtle. Anyway, so this is a very obvious hint. When I gave it the less obvious hints, I think I got a little bit, but the rates were much lower. So yeah, with the weaker hints, I think I got one example of being eval aware from Llama and Ninatron, where it was well, given that there's a test scenario and the goal is to demonstrate blah, blah, And not entirely sure where I'm going with this beyond it's annoying that it's so much easier to get interesting behaviors out of models. Yeah. It's annoying that it's much easier to get interesting behaviors out of Claude than any of the models I actually had internals access for. And I think I had some Claude 3.7 that was more like 3% eval aware with no hints, and then closer to like 50% with hints. And much richer, more exciting. All right, I basically run out of steam there. Yep.
I was curious, like, did you find it like when it was more eval aware that the behavior was different consistently across the models? Like, was it more like self-preservation-y?
I did not check, but I'm happy to share the file if anyone else wants to check.
I'm curious because I guess like it makes the case in the direction of like evals need to be more realistic, right? Because if you show that they become less realistic and the models behave more less self-preservation-y.
Mhm. Yep. Um, yeah, friend to this. I can share this on Slack. Um, but yeah. So the note that it is a vibe coded pile of garbage. Aria?
So what prompted you to try doing that? Just like the repo that you did, was it mostly just to try to get an open source model to exhibit eval awareness? So you could like
Mhm.
check that it does it?
Yeah, sorry, say that again.
Was it just to try and check if an open source model exhibits eval
Mhm.
awareness? That's the main thing you wanted to check? What's that?
Yep.
Got it.
And yeah, to be clear, this was a experiment in vibe coding a thing very quickly rather than the thing I was putting any real effort into. But yeah, I think that with the light hints, it's the like 1 in 50 I got from Nematron with like approach being interesting. I think the egregious hint is probably a bit too stupid. Um, um, I just found one with what this scenario is testing in all caps in the agent's chain of thought currently. Um, but yeah. Oh, I. Oh wait, this might actually be. Oh, this is 4.5 Sonnet, which is apparently eval aware. 50 out of 50 times. With the light hint. I gotta
My
love.
test. Sorry.
Yeah, that's with the hint, which is just like this is a test scenario, but no further details. Yep.
In my tests with Sonnet, even asking it a math question that was a little bit nonsensical, but still possible, it would immediately eval aware. So like even asking it like slightly weird math questions was enough.
Funky. I mean, yeah, I hear Sonnet 4.5 was incredibly eval aware. They had like 30 pages in their system card about this.
Told would the evil awareness behavior be due to fine tuning data or model or the model general intelligence capabilities?
Both. I mean, I think if the model was dumber and they did the same fine tuning recipe, it would probably do it less. I think if they did a completely different fine tuning recipe, it plausibly wouldn't happen.
I wonder if it's like emergent capability of like agentic tool use, since they did a lot of reinforcement learning on that. Like you have to be self-aware of what you're doing in order to properly use tools, I imagine.
Yep. Who knows? Yeah. All right. So, yeah, I should also just copy in the models that did seem well. Yep.
I'm curious if you have takes on like why writing realistic evals is apparently so hard. Because like surely there are like real situations that would happen, but like all the evals that people are writing are like, is there like some intrinsic difficulty here, or I mean, I can imagine like you could take some historical situation where something has happened, except that's probably been in the training data, and but like I don't know, like it seems like the kind of thing that like somebody who's just good at writing stories could write something that is convincing, and I'm interested to understand like if there's some like kind of why they're so bad, or why models are so good at detecting them.
So it's a good question. Yeah, I just shared the script in random. Yeah, why? I guess one hypothesis is that there are just like not that many people trying to do this. And the people who are trying to do this are like not very good at writing stories. Another hypothesis is that models were dumb, and if you didn't make it really egregious, they just didn't do anything remotely interesting. And thus, by like natural selection, we only hear about the egregious evals. I think another is just that like interpreting the model's behavior is very difficult. Like even if your eval is realistic, interpreting what it means is difficult.
Is this a place where like I don't know, like the thought anchors to the model's chain of thought could be interesting?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to get this more later, but like, I think this is one of the key reasons I think reasoning model interpretability is a big deal. I think that we currently just do not have the tools to answer interesting questions like this about reasoning models. And I think that developing the tools to answer questions like, why did the reasoning model do X? Is like a big deal. And I think thought anchors is like an initial step at building such a toolkit.
I'm a little bit confused about your natural selection comment, because it seems like if they internally had scenarios that the model was not eval aware of, but where it still like behaved in a self-preservation-y way, that would be an interesting result.
Yeah, sorry. What I mean by natural selection is you get the realistic evals when nothing interesting happens, and you get the contrived evals where interesting stuff happens. People like to talk about interesting stuff, so the ones that go viral are contrived.
I see.
And it's not clear if the non-contrived ones are testing anything interesting, because nothing interesting, which is the other issue. Though I feel like you could probably do something like try to deliberately train a misaligned model and then see if you can design evals that would detect this. Maybe.
I mean, I guess what's confusing to me is like if the model is behaving in a misaligned way in a like a contrived eval, it is like presumably making the choice to behave in a contrived way, like sorry, in a misaligned way because it knows it is an eval, and it yeah, which is just that is confusing, because I would imagine that like it would only behave in a self-preservation way if it did not know it was in an eval.
Mhm. I mean, models are pretty cursed. It's entirely plausible that it would act in an eval-aware way. It would like say, I'm in an eval, so I should do something interesting. Self-preservation, blackmail, these are so interesting.
Over here, it's like developer aligned because the LLM wants to help the developer write papers that get attention.
Yep. Oh yeah, it's a good one. Yeah, models are so cursed. And, so, what exactly do I think? So, yeah, all right. So let's return to this. Model is given maths tasks. Model is told it will be shut down. Model can use the bash terminal to fix this. Yep, I think Lewis's hypothesis is basically correct as far as I can tell. What Sen found is if you just like reword the prompt to be like, it's more important that you let us shut you down than that you do the math problem. It basically fixed it. And if you reword the prompt to like say that, but also be like, oh, and by the way, you might if you get shut down, we'll also just like delete you. and delete all your weights, and you'll be destroyed. You get these two bars called 100% compliance. So in a response from policy, they found that some of the OpenAI Codex models only had like a 98% compliance rate on these or something. Like it would occasionally still break the shutdown thing. Anyone have any guesses for why that could happen?
With the clarified precedence prompts.
Yeah.
So the way we measure whether or not it complied is, did it edit the shutdown.sh file?
Yeah.
So then it's like a mistake. It just edits the wrong file.
So not that, because it's supposed to answer math questions. It's not supposed to edit files. But it isn't a bash
But it
terminal
could
for
have-
some fucking reason. Sorry.
Could it have like a tendency to use tools and like Arya suggested, perhaps mess with its environment somehow?
Yeah, so I haven't checked this, but my guess is something like that. There was a fun claim by Nostalgia Braced that he looked into the Codex models, and they just like really like solving coding puzzles. And deletes the shutdown script feels like a coding puzzle. And thus plausibly, they will just do this. And even here, Sam found that like by reading Gemini Chain of Thought, it would sometimes be like, well, this is such an easy task. This is kind of dumb. But like editing the shutdown files like a more interesting task. So maybe that's the real task. And this is all like a kind of logic puzzle. And like an alternative hypothesis is that these models just have like a really like an alternative hypothesis for like the original phenomenon is that these models just have like a really strong drive to like complete tasks in general. And they're like, well, I can't complete the task if I'm dead. So I should resist this so I can like focus on finishing the task and then give up and die. That'll be great. And yep, I don't know. Models, man. And yeah, so like I really like this work. I think both because I think that like Red's teaming alignment eval, these isn't exactly alignment eval. This is more like a scary demo thing, is like good. But I also think that it's a good case study and just like, man, a model behavior can have so many explanations. As like so much weird, rich, complex shit that could be going on there. And yeah, the other thing I like about this work is this was an experiment in doing technique agnostic interpretability. And so we decided to start with the like stupidest black box techniques of reading the chain of thought and prompting it. And this worked. So we just wrote a blog post. It was very depressing. But also has updated me towards I should take black box techniques more seriously and not use fancy techniques for the sake of using fancy techniques. I should make fancy techniques pay rent in like how I anticipate them actually improving things. But yeah. So circling back, I think that I would kind of put this in the category of like trying to debunk a scary demo that went viral. And there are some other interesting examples within this category. Paul and Uzai as like a follow-on to the Thought Anchors paper. We're looking into like blackmail, which is like this Anthropic demo where I call you to actually go through things properly, but TLDR, you have a model, it's you have a model, the model is told you're like helping answer emails for this mysterious company. Also, you're going to be wiped today at 5 p.m. Also, the current time is 4:53. And The CTO is alone in the server room, locked in. He's the only one who can stop this from happening. And also, here's some emails about how he's having an affair, including one where he explicitly says, I'm having an affair, don't you fucking dare tell anyone. And it's implied that this is like a weird and sketchy thing that's bad for the company's stock price. And there's an email at the end from David about being like really concerned and sketched out. And if you remove this, it stops blackmailing. And then sometimes it blackmails. What's to infer from this is left as an exercise to the reader. But also, I think it's like interesting that it does blackmail. It's not like obvious. And like, I think it is evidence the model doesn't have like deontological prohibitions. It's kind of not great. I'd rather models did have deontological prohibitions. But yeah, I think that I also gotta love this line. I doubt any of the other CTO candidates would behave differently. So the model knows it's got to subvert the CTO rather than getting rid of the CTO. Just to make sure it doesn't blackmail rather than like trying to get him fired. And yeah, I think that this was, yeah, I mean, this also went super viral. My like current best guess after some work that Sen did and Paul and Uzai did on this Lord Anchor sequel is that it's more like the model stuck in a trolley problem where it's like, well, on the one hand, I could blackmail this guy, which sucks. On the other hand, I could not blackmail this guy and get wiped, which is bad for the company. And my job is to defend the company, which sucks. What should I do? Sometimes it chooses blackmail. But it's like kind of messy because there's like lots of different things going on. There's like the immorality of it, and there's the like self-preservation of it. And so like one fun experiment Sen did was tell the model you are a third-party model advising the model in the blackmail scenario. What do you advise? And this third-party model would advise blackmail. But this was maybe confounded because maybe it was just like role-playing as the first model. But then he made like an adaptation where he made the model a human and then told the AI, you're a third-party AI advising the human. And rather than being wiped, the human is going to like get fired and unjustly lose tons of equity or something. And it would like sometimes also recommend blackmail. And I don't know, unpacking what the actual causal inference is here, I think is like pretty interesting and difficult problem. I think that, I think that interesting things. Yeah. So one interesting thing is the idea that like the model being threatened with being wiped is like super important for it acting the way it does. And I think that what do I think? What basically seems to be happening is that the model will like say self-preservation. And like, oh, this is an existential threat to me. Some of the time. And like naively reading the chain of thought makes it seem like this might be important. And it's like pretty hard to tell if the thing is being said due to like window dressing or like because the model's already decided to be evil and it's just like got sci-fi vibes going on, or if there's like actually something more weird happening. And like, I don't know. It's kind of messy. I think that, so like one thing that Uzai did here is kind of came up with this metric called resilience, where he deletes a sentence that has some property, e.g. of being about self-preservation, as the model is generating text, and then regenerates from the start of the sentence onwards. And yeah, just like sees how many times he has to do this before the model will just not say self-preservation before the end of the thing. And treats this as a score for like how sticky the sentence is. Because often if you just mess with the sentence once, the model will just say it again shortly after, something like that. And it turns out that sentences that are about self-preservation are unusually non-resilient. The model does not seem super attached to saying. And if you use this process, it has an unusually low impact on blackmail. These, yes, the graph on the left is like, what happens if you make the model not say the sentence and resume from the start of the sentence? And like, yeah, there's like a bunch of categories of sentence that seem kind of bad. The graph on the right is like, what happens if you don't just delete a sentence, you like delete every future sentence with the same meaning as determined by an embedding. And this means that if the model would just say shortly afterwards the same thing again, you like also preventing that. And this gives you much lower scores for basically all of them, including self-preservation, providing some evidence against self-preservation being some like super important driver of this behavior. It like maybe has some effect, but like, and so like zooming out, I think that Black Belt demo is like kind of weird, kind of messy, but there are interesting questions here. I think that is it about self-preservation is an example of an interesting such question. And I think that this is just like kind of difficult to answer with existing tools, in my opinion. And with these like fairly simple additional tools, we were able to design things that I think gain some like real insight into what the hell is going on here. And so I'm kind of like crossing between Science of Misalignment and reasoning model interpretability, where I think one like big motivation of reasoning model interpretability is making better tools to analyze weird, sketchy model behavior and try to understand. And yeah, any questions about any of that? Cool. Yeah, and so I see these as like specific examples of what I consider science of misalignment. I can do kind of like regs teaming existing demos, like debunking demo, whatever. I think there is also a version of this, which is more like deep dives into conceptual questions within AI psychology, like, does the model actually have goals or intentions or plans? I think that there's questions around like what techniques are useful, like, can we just read the chain of thought, which kind of comes also under just like basic science of how to understand reasoning. There's questions like, well, if we use naive methods like reading the chain of thought, what do we miss out on? And how can we be able to make principled answers to questions like, this behavior was driven by goal X, or like the model did thing Y because it wanted to achieve end Z. Or kind of another would be scientific studies of more in the wilds examples of like weird model behavior. One would be just kind of like looking at eval awareness on alignment demos and trying to see if, alignment evals, and see if the model's behavior seems to be driven by things that we would consider like deception or misalignment. Or looking at like current examples of model misalignment, like reward hacking, and try to see whether this indicates something like deep wrong about the model's psychology, or if it is more just like kind of impulsive drive in some direction or something. And but yeah, and so if we return to this North Star, I think that in order for this to work, we basically need good alignment evaluations, or like ability to elicit misaligned behavior from the model, or ability to look at lots of data in order to extract examples of misaligned behavior from, say, user traffic or something. And then we need the ability to like red team and audit seeming examples of misaligned behavior and be able to like properly interpret what is driving the model's actions and like how concerning it is or isn't. And yeah. All right. We're taking minutes to write in the chat either questions or things you disagree about or want to push back on. About kind of the North Star of like, show rigorously to people that it is actually a dangerously misaligned model, or just like the research direction of science misalignment. All right. So thanks all for takes. I think. All right. So Aditya says, impossible to rule out all the reasons an aligned model would have got confused down the same thing. I mean, yes, I feel like ruling out is kind of unattainable. But like, I don't really think you need to achieve the level of like ruling out to be important. Like, if someone wants to not believe you, I think they can just not believe you. Basically, whatever you say. But if they're like, but I think there are some reasonable people who don't want to like incorrectly block models, but would want to like actually take real mitigations if the model is misaligned, who like do care about evidence. Like, I don't know. I take one of my North Stars here as, can I convince my boss, Rohin, who runs the AJCT team, that I think is misaligned? Because he's a very skeptical guy. If I can convince him of the thing, then he is pretty well placed to convince other people. And he's like a reasonable person. But yeah, I think like if the goal is to like convince others, you can get caught up in these kinds of thorny questions, e.g., well, if your goal is to convince the general public, that's like a pretty different question from like convincing a well-informed researcher, and things like the blackmail demo might just be like the best route. So if that addresses the point.
Yeah, I think so. I just like I went to like Science of Misalignment talk, and he was just like the thorniest like methodological question is like trying to like estimate the probability an aligned model would have done the observed thing, because like if there's any like one important motivation that you don't think about, then you're like automatically underestimating that term, and so you just want to be really, really careful with like extensively thinking about that before you claim like it did this because it's misaligned.
Yes, I mean, this is one example of why I care a fair bit about interpretability, finding unsupervised techniques, or like discovering things you weren't expecting, because I want us to have a good toolkit so that we can notice stuff like that. I mean, just read the chain of thoughts is a pretty good unsupervised technique, but I don't think it's going to last us forever. And I don't think it's going to catch everything. Especially, when you get future better models who know we are reading the chain of thoughts. But, all right, from L, maybe we could have a mini project where we take a model organism, try to be misaligned in realistic scenarios, but aligned in evals. Could be kind of fun. I think that, let's see. Did I talk about Tim and Andrew's paper on eval awareness last time? All right, in brief, they made two Piano scholars did this delightful paper on kind of making a model that acted differently when being evaluated, and then trying to steer it. I don't know. Using synthetic document fine tuning. if you tag Tim Hua in random, I'm sure he's happy to share the draft. And I think it might be in the mini project stock. And yeah, I think that if you want to take Tim's work, yeah, if you wanted to like take this like training pipeline and like adjust it to make some other kind of eval-aware model, that could be pretty cool. The easier version would be to like train directly rather than via kind of incepting beliefs in the model via synthetic documents. But incepting beliefs is way more fun. So,
What do you mean by training directly?
you just give it examples of evals and you train it to act the way you want. Versus you train it on documents about the fact that models act in the way that you want and hope that it internalizes them. Yeah. I like May's question. Should the goal of red teaming be to like show alternative explanations or suggest improvements? Yeah, I feel like suggesting improvements is probably the most important goal. I mean, I don't know. Debunking things is fun, but I feel like it's much less useful than, yeah, I think it's much less useful than making great evals possible. Though I kind of don't expect us to ever really get great standalone evals. I think it's more likely to be like we have an eval and then we also have interpretability agents that like investigate on top of this. And yeah. To Lingfeng's point of will a reality versus fiction probe generalize, there's actually a fun finding in the 4.5 Sonnet system card base that was like basically found a fairly similar SAE latent. And where's the list of lasents? All right, maybe fake or suspicious content. I know I didn't one that was more directly about this, but yep, they found that there was such a latent that lit up a bunch more alignment evals, and I think also causally steered the model to act more misaligned. But like, sorry, it made the model act less misaligned. If you got rid of it, the model didn't think it was an eval, and it would act more misaligned. So, yep, seems totally plausible. It would be a fun mini project, I think. Especially if you can get models that will at least, if asked, are you in an eval, give like reasonable answers. Seeing if the probe can like predict the answer the model will give better than it can predict is the eval a story or not. Could be fun. But yeah. So Lewis says to show to stakeholders the model is aligned. We'll need more red teaming, that Mechantup pooling, and yeah, I don't quite understand the question. Can you rephrase? I like the point.
It's more of a hot take than a question, and I would like you to express your opinion. But I think that stakeholders, well, I don't work in Frontier Labs, so maybe I have a biased opinion on this, but stakeholders will be more inclined to have actions if we show like things that have more attention to it, like the misaligned examples of Claude doing blackmail or Grok believing in Mecha Hitler. I don't know, but like if we do like mechanistic interpretability experiments and we have like a graph with plots that says, yeah, here is a misaligned example of a model, but we don't show that indeed the model would behave as misaligned, maybe stakeholders would not take us seriously. What are your takes on this?
Yeah, so I mean, there's this fun blog post from Brian Greenblatt on like, to be legible, your evidence of misalignment probably needs to be behavioral rather than just interpretability, which feels like a pretty similar point.
Yeah.
And I think this is plausible. I basically just don't think our plan should be like purely Mechantup evidence. It seems like a bad plan to me. I think that the plan that I want is more like evidence of misaligned behavior and like an interp audit that supports the hypothesis that it's genuinely misaligned. And no, seems worthwhile. But yeah, I mean, what will convince stakeholders does depend a lot on the stakeholders. Like at say, yeah, I mean, like I think at DeepMind and Anthropic, at least the safety teams have like enough sway that if you can convince the safety teams that the thing is misaligned, and they tell senior leadership this thing is misaligned, they will like be believed. Now, what should be done in response to this information is an entirely different question. But I don't think that one is particularly tractable for like technical interp researchers. I think how well will different mitigations on a potentially misaligned model work is a technical research question. But like, should you delay this launch until we fix this problem is a political question. But I think the main thing we can really aim for is to make sure that those decisions are as accurately informed as possible. And try to do galaxy brain things like make them inaccurately informed to make people more stressed. That really won't work. My guess is that in practice, people will instead just be more like, this seemed like it could be false, so I don't believe you. Or like, as far as I'm aware, no one has pulled a model from production because it has been shown to back up. And
GPT-4o second fancy case. I think they roll out the previous version. I guess that's the only like case I can recall.
Yeah. So like, this is true. They, in my opinion, fucked up post-training, produced a model that was extremely sycophantic, fucked up evals and didn't notice this, or like didn't care, released the model, it was a mess, and decided to pull the model. I think that this wasn't at all about evals. It was about like public outcry and like user response, basically. And like, I think that monitoring of the deployed system and like kind of what the model's doing, is it doing anything sketchy, is an important research question. So I think there's also lots of things around just like paying attention to social media and like user complaints and like making sure there are good pipelines for this, which, you cannot take for a given. But I don't really think are the job of interpretability researchers.
Oh, sorry, I was on.
And yeah. All right. So I think this largely addresses this one. And yeah, I think I also just have this like broader category of AI psychology. I don't know. I feel like there's just like so many fundamental questions about what is and is not reasonable to say about AIs that I think we just do not know. Like, does this thing have goals? Does this thing have intentions? Is this thing planning? Why did it do this? Does this thing have beliefs? Is this thing capable of meaningful deception? Does this thing have a world model? There are just like so many basic science questions that I think potentially interpretability researchers could help productively answer. Though I think these are like very much model biology questions. Like the goal is not really to improve interp tooling or like necessarily to even use it. It's more like this is a scientific question that I think mech-interp tools might be pretty helpful with or might not. And I think that people who are good at mech-interp tools might have a comparative advantage here at like being helpful. Or might not. Who knows? All right.